There is no weapon too great or too trivial that it might not be used in the destruction of the alien, the mutant, or the heretic. From the ancient superweapons of the Dark Age of technology and the constructs of the Centurio Ordinatus that seek to replicate their power, through the massed ranks of void ships, tanks, and artillery, all the way down to the lowliest blade and bloodiest fist. Those that would usurp the might of the Imperium are vast, and so the arsenal of humanity must be equally vast to meet them. To the uninitiated, the cacophony of weapons fire can be overwhelming. The resounding bellow of heavy guns, the authoritative thunder of mighty engines, the shrieking roar of burning dropships, and the haunting echoes of anguished lamentation. But the cult Imperialis teaches the truly faithful to ignore what they see and hear and recognize the greater truth within. Every weapon is an instrument, and each has its notes to play within the eternal symphony of death. But to those immersed in the music of the Emperor's orchestra, one note is forever raised above all others. Its melodies are both ethereal and profound, for nothing else so effortlessly intertwines with the reverberation of the greatest cannon or the slash of the bayonet. It is the bolt gun, and with every round that leaves its barrel, it sings not only with all the hate mankind can muster, but the echo of every bullet ever fired, every death ever dealt by the hand of man. To hear the scream of bolter fire is to rejoice in the transcendent melodies of humanity's bloody history made real. As with anything produced in abundance across the Imperium, there is no definitive, standard variant of bolt gun. It is manufactured to a dizzying number of standards, patterns, and variants, and even models of the same template might appear remarkably distinct. Often, the true extent of upgrades, shortcuts, substitutions, or alterations employed by its manufacturer can only be revealed through the firing of the weapon, followed by a careful disassembly. Yet, every bolter, regardless of its origins or method of construction, adheres to the same fundamental characteristics. They are mid-range weapons, most effective against lightly armored personnel, but their most prominent feature has little to do with the weapon itself, but rather the type of ammunition it fires. Where comparably primitive autoguns or their more ancient predecessors fired projectiles that relied on some kind of cased framework primer and propellant to launch a round upon ignition, the eponymous bolts, utilized by bolt guns, are entirely self-propelled. Each contains an integrated solid fuel propellant, essentially making every bolt more akin to a miniature rocket than any other form of munition. When a bolt is fired, a small conventional charge is ignited, propelling the round out of the barrel. Simultaneously, this charge triggers the ignition of the propellant contained within the bolt. The timing of the propellant ignition is meticulously synchronized to ensure it occurs only when the round is fully outside the barrel. It is a complex process that requires sophisticated mechanisms within the bolt gun, but is the only method of ensuring the gas produced by the reaction does not risk catastrophic failure within the weapon's barrel. The bolt then accelerates towards its target under its own power. The most common types of bolter are the lighter, smaller bolt pistol, the larger, more cumbersome heavy bolter, and the bolt gun itself. The latter are increasingly distinguished as bolt rifles and provide a versatile middle ground. As with many variants, the heavy bolter in particular is notable for its different method of igniting bolt charges, utilizing an electric pulse rather than a firing pin. Such minor changes are ubiquitous across bolter variants, and often necessary for their function. Other prominent variations include carbine bolters, with shorter barrels designed to facilitate greater maneuverability by the user, marksman bolters, with longer barrels and more sophisticated optics, and assault bolters that feature 2 or more barrels and an increased rate of fire. Condemner pattern bolters, reminiscent of ancient Terran crossbows, that fire elongated bolt stakes, and the psychically imbued, ritually inscribed psi cannons, are representative of more exotic variants and typically reserved for use against demons or other unique foes. Countless other variations exist, however, usually a blending and merging of a bolt gun's principal archetypes to varying degrees. When held by or mounted on powered armor, vehicles, or even titans, bolters are often configured in far larger and heavier iterations. Hurricane pattern bolters are little more than 6 individual bolt guns arrayed on a single weapon mount, while the Vulcan Mega Bolter has been completely re-engineered, featuring a dual 5-barreled electrically fired rotary design. The extreme diversity in bolter design is reflected in the ammunition they fire. Standard bolts are .75 caliber and equipped with a hardened, diamantine penetrating tip. This allows the bolt to theoretically pass through most forms of light armor before an explosive charge detonates the target from within. Against organic matter, such as Tyranid bioforms or mutants, Hellfire, Inferno, or Hyperfrag bolts are preferred. These bolts inject mutagenic acid, ignite superheated chemicals, and cause airburst fragment damage, respectively. Though not initially designed to be effective against armor, bolters can nevertheless utilize certain types of ammunition to mitigate this weakness. Kraken penetrator rounds contain a core of pure adamantium and a larger charge, while Scorpius bolts include a sabot component, allowing for a narrower bolt with high sectional density. Other bolts have been designed to nullify the effects of cover, neutralize enemy machine spirits, or even readjust their own trajectory while in flight. Some of the most advanced variants can even lock onto heat signatures, various types of radiation, or even corrupted souls. Such bolts are often assembled by hand, and exceedingly rare. The vast array of bolter variants and their prevalence across the Imperium of Man is due to their relative ease of construction. Though far more sophisticated than the las weaponry typically issued to the Astra Militarum, the process of constructing bolt weaponry remains well understood by the Mechanicum. Even the primitive populace of a feudal world, if properly instructed and motivated, might adeptly work a manufacturing line, while Forge worlds can produce bolts and bolt guns in enormous numbers. Though it is within the many chapters of the Adeptus Astartes that bolt guns are most commonly used, they can be found within every Imperial organization of any note. The Orders Militant of the Adeptus Sororitas, Voidsmen at Arms of the Imperial Navy, and the Arbitrators of the Adeptus Arbites all make use of bolters. However, in most cases these are downsized versions designed to be used by unaugmented, baseline humans. For a non-Astartes to wield a bolter not designed explicitly for their use requires either some kind of mount, a dedicated fire team, or both. These can be seen most frequently aboard the vehicles used by the Astra Militarum and its heavy weapons platoons. Though bolt guns make up only a small percentage of the small arms utilized by the Imperial Guard, the vast size of the organization means more bolt guns are in service within it than the remainder of the Imperium combined. Yet, the close association between bolters and the Astartes is well earned. Only the most specialized Space Marines will enter battle without one as their primary weapon, and even then, they will still likely possess a bolt pistol or similar variant as a sidearm. The demanding nature of bolt guns and the repetitive maintenance needed to keep them at optimal performance is also well suited to the temperament of the Astartes. Disassembling a bolter, applying cleaning compounds to areas of carbon fouling, dirt or other debris, replacing parts, tightening components back into specification, and the many other steps necessary to keep both the weapon and its machine spirit in fighting condition have become a ritualistic practice within the chapters. When not in use, they are carefully maintained by artificers or tech priests. The newly introduced Mark II Call Pattern Bolt Rifle is likely the most prevalent variant of bolter in use by the Space Marines, though others, some ancient even at the dawn of the Imperium, continue to be maintained. Astartes bolters, regardless of model, are the most advanced in the Imperium, and many can be directly integrated into power armor, displaying to the wearer information such as remaining rounds, barrel temperature, and other relevant data. Many chapters continue to iterate on this design and others, producing sub-variants and specialized ammunition that takes advantage of their own esoteric knowledge or exotic resources. The degree to which Astartes bolters outperform their smaller derivatives is so severe that many include biometric scanners, preventing their use by anyone who does not match a genetic imprint. This is not only to stop these bolters from being captured and used against their former owners, but also to stop baseline chapter serfs or human auxiliaries from attempting to fire a weapon whose recoil might shatter their spine. The Adeptus Arbites imposes particularly brutal sentences on those who have attempted to circumvent such safety measures. Even so, Astartes bolters are periodically found in the service of heretics or Xenos cults. When precisely the bolter was first introduced has long since been lost to Imperial scholars, but its ubiquity across even disparate human worlds during the Great Crusade suggests it was widely used during the Dark Age of technology, or perhaps even before. Yet in most cases, these were primitive weapons by Imperial standards, and it is whispered that it was the Emperor himself, a master scientist and craftsman, who first designed the standard Terran bolter, from which all other Imperial models supposedly derive. Regardless, bolt guns did not enter widespread Imperial service until the early years of the Great Crusade. During the Unification Wars, the Space Marine legions instead relied on the far more powerful Volkite weapons, which could generate superheated beams of energy. Even the most ancient forges of the Mechanicum had difficulty producing such weapons in the numbers required by the expanding Crusade, however, and most fell out of service in the final centuries of the 30th millennium. During the subsequent carnage of the Horus Heresy, bolt guns were the principal weapons utilized by the legions on both sides, ensuring that many remain in the hands of traitors and heretics even 10,000 years later. Even in the Era Indomitus, when the Imperium is assailed by forces that could have never been anticipated or accounted for during the most desperate hours of the heresy, the bolter stands resolute. Wherever the enemies of mankind gather, the darkness is pierced by the brilliant glow of muzzle flashes, and death is delivered to every brand of traitor, every strain of Xenos. Shrines are dedicated to its worship, whole worlds to its manufacture. It has eradicated species, decimated empires, and even the brutish orcs have learned through terrible slaughter on which end they would rather be. Yet above all, it remains an orchestra unto itself, an instrument, a choir. And until the gates of terror are breached and the last human soul expunged from the galaxy, it will continue to perform in the vast symphony of death. It will sing the final song that humanity has left to it, one that can only be performed in the language of faith, wrath, hatred, and death.
In Arsenal, the Templin Institute investigates the weapons, vehicles, and other constructs from across alternate worlds. If you've enjoyed this video and would like to join the Templin Institute, consider pledging to our Patreon page. Along with increased security access, you'll be able to vote in polls to determine future topics, get custom wallpaper every week, and receive some other exclusive rewards.